And the major thing that the Lancet Commission was trying to say is we need more research on what actually makes a difference in people's lives. And that we do need to work with the autistic community, both people with autism and also parents, to figure out what makes a difference, because we know so much more about biology, which is very interesting, but is on the whole has not helped. And so it will help, I think, someday, but it's very long term. And we need to know more, just like how many hours of something does a kid need, and how do you decide, and does telehealth CBT work, for whom and why not, or why, and those kind of things. So that was the main point. And then also across cultures, because most of the research has really come from Europe or the US, or to some extent some of the wealthier Asian countries. But there's a lot of autistic people out there who don't get anything. So that, I'll just put in my push for Lancet, because profound autism just hit the news more. I think that there's now there's now the Profound Autism Alliance, and there's I think both the major research organizations are recognizing profound autism. There was a lot of conflict over what would go into, they're trying to pass a new bill for autism cares in Congress. And there were really very different groups who were saying, if you mention profound autism, we won't sign it. And then other people saying, you have to mention it or we won't sign it. I think they've agreed on words, but I'm not sure even what those words are. But I think the idea of like high support needs. So I think that's a big step, and at least recognizing, it's just ironic, because most of the biological research on autism, that at least the genetics, has been on kids who are very handicapped. And then all the other research is mostly on people who are not. And so there's just, again, this middle that doesn't get addressed. And then there's also we need behavioral research on people that have more severe issues. And we need, well, I don't know how much we need the genetics of brighter people. I'm more skeptical I'm skeptical that's going to help a whole lot. But anyway, it's just, I think people are getting more used to profound autism and the idea. But there's various groups, there are groups that want us to declare who has profound autism when they're 3 years old, which I think is really wrong, because you don't know. On the other hand, I think accepting the fact that there is this broad spectrum, and sometimes people who can't speak for themselves are left out, and that we do need families, and we need to recognize that someone needs to advocate for these people, because they're not able to talk, to write books or speak, or they can speak, but they can't really stick up for themselves and what they need.
Yeah, I just read a paper, and I think it just came out, about this university or research center claimed that they could predict profound autism versus non-profound autism based off of the size of a brain, or something in the cell biology, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I don't know. I mean, they might. I mean, I do think there's certain genetic disorders that are very much tied to intellectual disability, and often seizures. And so the chances, if you have those, if you have autism, which not everybody does, of also having an intellectual disability are high. But I would hate for people to be limiting kids when they're very little, saying they're never going to be able to do this or that. I think, what we're interested in, just because we've been doing research so long, is the trajectory. Like, how are you changing? And if you can use that plus who is helping and who's not, then I think that's much more useful. It's just that it's, from a medical point of view, it's more time consuming if you have to have 2 or 3 points instead of just one.